Steve, Caitlin, thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining us to sort of shine a little bit on the work of the Academy, particularly during this, I guess what is a really important week for you guys, being Youth Development Week. I think the first thing I'd like to do is just find out a little bit more about what you guys do, really. So, Caitlin, let's go for you first. Can you just tell us a little bit about your role? What's your title? What do you do within the Academy?
Of course, I've got a quite long-winded title, but my title is Academy Performance Support Coordinator, and I'm the Senior Sports Therapist as well. So my role largely is to operationally oversee all of the performance-related disciplines, so nutrition, psychology, medical, sports science, and make sure that they're all running how they should throughout the programme, so that all of our Academy players get the help that they need to remain on the pitch for as long as possible.
Cool. And Steve, you?
Yes, I'm Stephen Payne. I'm the head of coaching in the Academy. And what that means is I'm responsible for coaching methodology, coaching syllabus, how we coach, what we coach, and then who coaches it really. So my team isn't necessarily the under-9s or the under-18s, it's the coaching team. So I'm responsible as the in-house coach developer at the club.
Right, so in terms of on a day-to-day basis then, Steve, and Caitlin, I will come back to you in a second, but in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis, Steve, are you out on the grass, are you coaching the boys, or are you devising coaching plans behind the scenes? Where are we likely to see you on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, that's a good question, and it's very varied. I'm very fortunate to have quite a privileged position here where, as I said, I'm not responsible for a particular age group. So some days it will be admin, and it will be session plans and planning and fixture sort of selection, things like that, and stuff in the office. And other days it will be on the grass and supporting coaches, whether it be the full-time coaches or the part-time coaches in the evening training session. So it can be quite varied, really.
And Caitlin, you mentioned that your role is all about making sure that the young lads in the Academy are sort of fit to train every day and to play. Does that mean you're part of the physio team, or are you involved more in kind of longer term things than running out, treating injuries, that kind of stuff?
So I'd say a mixture of both. So I'm a sports therapist by background. That's what I studied at university. So whilst I'm not pitch side now, so I don't do the run-ons and things at all of the matches and things, so I am less visible. But I do work with the longer-term rehab players, particularly with the under-18. So throughout the day, they might work with me at the stadium instead, for example, if they're needing a little bit more specialist equipment and they're just going to be out for a longer period. Similarly to Steve, I do have periods then where the other side of my role is that admin side. So my job is to make sure that our team of medical staff, for example, our S&C coaches and things are all where they need to be and when, to make sure that from the under-9s up, everyone's got the programme that they need to have.
So you mentioned there about being from under-9s upwards, and this is probably going to be a question for both of you, so Steve, you can start thinking about this one already, but under-9s upwards, that must be a lot of boys you have to deal with on a regular basis. Is that, how much of a challenge is that to make sure that you're giving them all the maximum attention you can?
It can be quite a big challenge. I think we're in a really fortunate position this season that we're sort of growing our team quite nicely. So previously it was just a medical team. We're really lucky that we've got 8 part-time staff that work with us, which is quite unusual for this level of club. So they're a massive help in terms of during the evenings. They're the ones that, whilst myself or TJ, my full-time colleague as well, might book in the assessments, they're the ones that are actually hands-on and doing it for us. So that's a huge help. And then in terms of the wider department, we've sort of grown in terms of we've got Dan Prigg now that's full-time with us for strength and conditioning. We've got Bailey Thomas as well, who's starting part-time with us for strength and conditioning. So we're able to just grow across the disciplines now and make sure that across the evenings and the daytime, everyone's getting that hands-on support. So.
And then is that the same for you, Steve, in terms of how you're making sure that the young lads are developing their techniques and their skills and their tactics? How do you balance all that to make it work best for everyone?
Yeah, so it's a real team effort really. So I suppose working more closely with me, there's phase lead coaches. So there's coaches who are responsible for a smaller group of age groups. So Luke would work with the under-9s through to the under-12s, for example. And then within Luke's phase, he'd then have part-time coaches working with him as well. So it sort of then boils down to probably a ratio of sort of 1 to 8, 1 to 10, which is a more manageable number. And then it means that we can provide some really good support in terms of what the player needs as an individual, and then detail that through their IDPs and make sure that that's being delivered, session by session and week by week through their coaching program.
IDP, Individual Development Plan?
Correct, yeah.
There you go. See, I've done my research. It's all right, it's all good. So then I guess the next question for me is going to be then, how does that then fit into the bigger picture? Because obviously the majority that we see as a football team is the games that are played on a Saturday for the first team. How does your work fit into developing footballers to play for Milton Keynes Dons on a Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, good question. It's not necessarily just a case of trying to develop players for Milton Keynes Dons. It's trying to make them, make them sort of relevant for the industry and make sure that they've, along the way, they've picked up and understand some of the demands of modern football. And that's something our coaching team do really, really well in an age-specific sort of way, really. So what the under-9 needs is completely different to what the under-18 needs. And then along the way, there's a few golden threads within the academy that we really try to tether towards the first team. So we've got a competency programme which includes things like resilience and competitiveness and focus, for example, and things that if we practice along the way, we're pretty sure that they'll have a good chance of not only sort of reaching that end destination of being a first team footballer, but if they fall short of that, then hopefully they'd have picked up a few sort of tricks and techniques to be a sort of a high functioning sort of member of society, whether that's in sport or any other sort of industry.
And I guess then I guess there's two things there. One is that I guess whatever the style of football is that's being played at the top in the first team, you're developing footballers and people that are able to adapt to that. But then also if they don't make it as a footballer here, because unfortunately there is a high rate of, for want of a better word, failure, they can go out and they can be a footballer elsewhere or be whatever they want to be elsewhere. So you're helping them succeed wherever they go in life.
Yeah, spot on. And it's meant to be hard. Not everyone can do it. Not everyone can become a footballer. So, and we're really aware of that and understand what the demands, or we think we understand what the demands are with the first team. And we try to replicate those as closely as possible in a sort of, again, beat the drum all the time about that in that age appropriate sort of manner. It shouldn't sound and look exactly like the first team at under 9 or under 11 or under 13. But we definitely try to sort of tip our cap to Warney's style and how we want the first team to look and understand that those boys are ultimately really proud to represent the academy and the football club, and we want them to, we want their first destination to be that football pitch. So that's the coaching programme we try to create, really.
And then, like, from your point of view, Kate, then is the goal for you to try and help the lads develop to be physically strong when they get to the end of their time in the academy, to then be ready to be footballers, or do they still have work to do once they've graduated, in effect?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think they're never 100% physically ready, I think would be my comment. They can always develop on something even once they're with the first team, but our department's aim is to try to make sure that they're as physically as ready as possible for first team football and for what those demands bring. So again, as Steve says, we do make it age appropriate. So, we don't have the foundation phase in the gym, for example, but what are they doing on the pitch in sort of a disguised way, for example, that means that they are working on certain skills that help them get there. So as they get older, we introduce more and more the youth phases in the gym, at least once every 2 weeks, as much as we can. As they get older, they're in even more. And that just means that they are as physically ready as possible to cope the older that they get. I think from the other part of our department, it's also that competencies like Steve spoke about. So we help from the psychology point of view. What can we sort of work on with them there? From an injury point of view, we try to look at, okay, if you're not on the pitch right now, what can you do that's still going to help you get there as well? And how can you be a good footballer whilst you aren't playing football? Is something we think about.
How much of what you do as well is kind of influenced by what age they are and where they are in their education and their development as teenagers, I guess? How much do you have to be really cognitive of that, or do you just kind of go, no, we're doing this? And we
Very much so. I think particularly in the performance department, where one really key thing for us is how much they're growing. So in terms of growth and maturation, it's something that we track to make sure that they're safe and that they remain in training as much as they can. There's various times when they're growing the most, they're at risk for a lot of injury. So if we don't keep an eye on that, that's something that they're then at more risk for if we leave them in. So likewise, in terms of how they are with their understanding of what they're doing and their age, I think sometimes the way that they react to certain things is different. Just puberty and things is a natural part of that. And then the way that they're mentally coping with things is something we think about. So as an MDT, it's something that we consider a lot, and what do we need to introduce at certain times of the season for them. So whether it's in and around retain release, whether it's around moving schools, GCSEs, etc., that actually does their focus need to be further away from football, and does it need to be school, does it need to be anything else that just helps them cope with the programme a little bit better as well.
And Steve, something Caitlin just touched on there is about how the kids have different needs at different times. How do you obviously, like, children grow at different rates and they need different things at different points in their life compared to other kids of the same age. How do you factor that into their coaching? How do you make sure that they are getting the right whatever it is they need at the right time?
Yeah, good question. There's not a perfect answer. I think the important thing whenever we're trying to create the right session for the right player at the right time, or select the right game for the right player at the right time, that might be because of growth or maturation or returning from injury. And we're really lucky, again, we've got a real collaborative sort of environment which we work in. So that's the first stop, is we can have a good conversation and thrash out what's going to be best for the particular individual. And then I suppose this is where I earn my money, really, is to make sure that we've got coaches and we've got people around those young people who are reflecting on sort of the actions that they've sort of, you know, presented to the young player, the position that they've played, the amount of minutes they've played, and the opportunity they've given that player to practice in any given week. And if we're always aware of that and have the player's best interests at heart, we tend to not go too far wrong. We do try to run an accelerated pathway, so we try to get the best players through the programme quickly. And our experience tells us that young people hit the first team at a good age and a young age, and you're seeing that across the game in general now. Young players are landing with the first team a little bit sooner, and that's something that we've always tried to do here at the club. And you know, history is kind of, you know, can point to examples of that. And so we try to then replicate that a little bit further down the programme as well. So trying to accelerate players into the next age group, and sometimes that means the next format of football as well. So it might be 5v5 football moving to 7v7, or 9v9 moving to 11v11. So we're always kind of mindful of that, and just always having the kids' best interests at heart and thinking about what's best for those in any particular weekend.
Okay, it sounds like it's lots of moving parts and there's loads to consider, and
Lots,
it's never,
yeah.
like I'm asking these questions like they're really linear and straightforward, and it's really not. So I appreciate you guys trying to find the right answer. Therefore, like, I guess the last question, you're probably going to hate me for this, but like, I'll start with you, Steve. What's a successful season for you? Are you judged on anything particular? Is it like number of kids that get through into the first team, or is it something more holistic than that?
Yeah, so we've set ourselves the target of 20 by 20. So instead of it being season by season, we understand that it is messy and it is bumpy, and there are sort of pitfalls and peaks and troughs in learning. So we don't necessarily go after anything in particular in a single season. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get as many players over that line as possible into professional contracts, and then we're trying to, you know, get them to sustain careers and stay in that game and stick as long as they can. And if they can achieve 20 appearances by their sort of 20th birthday, then we kind of feel that we've given them a good start into professional football. So that's really, I suppose, the big stuff. And then I suppose on a more sort of granular level, we make sure that every session and every game are as competitive as possible, and players come away from a game or a training session feeling like they've had a go and they've had a real opportunity to improve and to get better at whatever that thing is that young person is trying to achieve. And I think that then sort of bleeds into the off-field stuff, whether that be the education or their bits and pieces in the gym, or if they're on the medical couch. You know, it's making sure that they give it a real go at every available opportunity.
And that's really interesting about the 20 by 20, because there's a big board over here. You probably obviously can't see it because the cameras aren't facing that way, but we've got all the names of the academy that have been there, and they've achieved that. So it's great to hear a bit more about that. Caitlin, is it the same kind of goals for you over a course of a year or a longer period of time to give those kids that opportunity, or is your direction slightly different?
I'd say it's a combination. I think naturally that is the academy overarching goal. So as an MDT, everyone sort of will have the focus to how is our department contributing towards that. I think on, I suppose, a more departmentally view, I think our successful season would be, you know, looking at things like, are our long-term injured players getting back in and on the pitch without any problems? Are they staying there? Do they feel happy and confident to be there? And or not having long-term injuries in the first place, naturally, is also an aim for us, but we started the season with some this year, for example. So our big aim is to get them back on the pitch later this year and be happy and playing again almost with no further problems. So I think we obviously have, each department's got our own KPIs and performance indicators, so we look at those, and ours are quite broad, given our department is quite broad. We cover a lot of areas, so we try to make sure that we cover off sort of some of that performance psychology, some of the nutrition, S&C specific ones, and medical as well. But the overarching is to try and contribute towards the 20 by 20. So it is from a performance point of view, what do we need to do to make sure players are physically ready to be able to do that as well.
You're all going in the same direction and
Exactly.
trying to achieve the same thing. So that's cool. Brilliant, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well done.